There is a difference between being driven crazy and being crazy. You can be driven crazy, or that's the expression we use, driven crazy, without being crazy by certain situations and usually dealings with other people. That's usually what drives people crazy. People aren't usually driven crazy by things that have nothing to do with other people. Occasionally, they might say something, especially say, okay, well, there's this dog barking. But that even has to do with people, because that barking dogs come from people owning dogs. But let's say, it's really hard to think of any example that doesn't involve dealings with another person, or the effects of other people being around, it's likely to make you feel like you're being driven crazy. So I can't think of anything. But you might say something like, okay, well, there's these squirrels that run over my roof every day, and it drives me crazy. Maybe, I don't know. But there's a distinction between actually being crazy and just circumstances, and interactions with other. That's generally what really generally tends to drive us crazy. Is interactions with other certain types of mentality of people. There are certain people who just are so good at driving you crazy. Some of them doing it deliberately or consciously and deliberately. Others doing it unconsciously but deliberately. I think most people and sometimes some people are not doing it deliberately at all, but they're just what they're doing is really annoying, and just the fact you have to be around them can drive you crazy. But there are certain people that can drive you crazy with their mentality. And one of the worst ones that I've experienced since I was in 6th grade is the I'm rubber and you're glue mentality. And anything that you say bounces off of me and sticks to you. So it's like these people, it's basically it's just a psychological bullying. So I can do anything I want to you, at least verbally, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what it is. The I'm rubber and you're glue. It's a intellectual form of bullying. I'm bigger than you. I'm going to squash you, and you can't do a fucking thing about it. And any type of bullying, that can drive. Well, yeah. But it's I guess an ordinary type of a physical bullying, the reaction tends to be a physical and even a feeling like the chemical hormonal reaction of fear and aggression that you experience physically, but a psychological, intellectual form of bullying, because it doesn't usually involve anything physical. Your body and your whatever reflexive physical responses don't have anything to react against there. So the only thing it left to react to is it's in your mind, because that's the form of bullying it is. It's a mental bullying, and thus the reactions that you are likely to experience to this kind of bullying is going to be a mental reaction. And it's this kind of psychological, intellectual, mental bullying that can make you feel like, God, this really drives me crazy. Because that being driven crazy is a response to that intellectual type of bullying, every bit as much as adrenaline and sensations of fear or aggression and anger are a reaction to physical bullying. So I guess that's what drives me crazy. You know, even just putting it into words that way and sort of defining it makes it a little bit easier to look at it in perspective and say, okay, now it doesn't have to drive me crazy so much. Because when it happens, now I can step back and say, oh, wait a second, I realize why it's driving me crazy. Because it's a form of psychological, intellectual, mental bullying. And of course, that's going to act upon your mind. That's exactly what it's designed to do. Designed to drive you crazy. So people do this. I'm rubber and you're glue. I can say anything I want. Those type of people, and they know when they do it. That's part of the game for them. Is that because it's only mental, it's only verbal, it's only psychological. They didn't touch you, didn't lay a finger on you. So that if you hit them or in any way approach them in a way that they think is threatening, they'll say, "Ooh, look at you! You're attacking me. You're the bully. I didn't do anything to provoke this. I didn't lay a finger on you." They know this, and that's that knowledge is the whole core of their bullying tactic. Is, I know that I just keep pushing you and needling you and needling you and pushing you until you reach the point where you feel a physical aggression because you can't. Because nothing you say, everything you say, I have a way to flip it around so that you can't win. That's the game. I'm rubber and you're glue. Nothing you say can have any effect against anything I say. Heads I win and tails you lose. And you're damned if you do, and you are damned if you don't. And let's look at that expression in this situation. You're damned if you do. If somebody sets up the game board so that you cannot any move you make is checkmate or check. Any piece you try to move, it's either check or checkmate. And they've rigged it. They've set it up that way. That is designed so that you can't make a move. Any move you make, or you're damned if you do. Yeah. Any move that you make, they beat you because it's rigged so that you cannot win. And you're damned if you don't. If you don't make a move, or you say I'm not playing, then they say, "Ha, you're a quitter because you are a chicken, and you won't even play." Damned if you do, and damned if you don't. If you try to play against the stacked deck, they mock you for losing. And if you say, "Okay, I quit. I refuse to play against the stacked deck," they say, you forfeit. That's the way it goes, isn't it? People who stack the decks, that's a form of that type of bullying. So anyhow, speaking of stacking the decks, this is what happens psychologically. And this is part of this whole intention of this game, is to so frustrate you with the fact that the whole game is rigged and that you cannot move. Any move you make is automatically in check or checkmate. That's going to push you to the point where you say, I can't say anything more to this person, and the only way I can retaliate against them is physically. That's the only option left. And then they say, "Woo, what are you attacking me for no reason, totally unprovoked? Help, police, this man's crazy." Okay? This man's crazy. And there you go. Because you can deliberately try to drive a person crazy so that you can then accuse them of being crazy, getting them locked up, getting them put in a straitjacket, getting them shot full of drugs by the system that says, oh, we know what's best, this is for your own good. That's the point of driving a person crazy, and there's a difference between being crazy and being driven crazy. Any sane person, any sane, rational person who has no problems with mental functions, has no problems distinguishing reality from fiction, has no hallucinations there's no hallucinations, and is able to see and think clearly, can still be put in a position where through psychological bullying they can be driven crazy. It's an expression we use, and there's a distinction between being driven crazy and being crazy, just as there's a difference between feeling bullied and being frightened of shadows. You know, a person who sees a butterfly and goes, oh, moth, oh! Well, there's nothing to be afraid of. Discounting the whole question of what their prior experiences in life that conditioned them to be that way, perhaps, but just discounting that, just the idea that somebody would be afraid of their shadow or afraid of something harmless. Okay, that's a form of being crazy, sort of. But a person who recognizes a bully who's going to attack them and reacts in a defensive manner is not a crazy person. They're reacting to something very real, and being driven crazy by a deliberate psychological mental bullying tactics is different from being crazy, where you just can't tell night from day, or you do anything in simple reason and logic. There's a very real difference, and the big problem of the whole our notions of psychology and psychiatry is that there are these games being played, and it is often used politically, socio-politically. You don't have to be into politics to be dealt with politically. A person in your family, or anybody, any interactions with other people is in a sense political. If somebody wants to get you locked up for being a nuisance or in their way, or in opposition to them, that's political in a social sense. And this whole psychology game is used politically to say, well, somebody doesn't have, we can take away this from you, and you don't have the right to that. We need to have your assets have to be put in trust under a trust fund with an administrator, because you're not psychologically capable, you're not psychologically sound to handle your own affairs, etc. You're not fit to be a parent, or to be this or that. And so the psychiatry is often used politically to label somebody crazy, to get somebody labeled crazy. And there is a difference between being crazy and being driven crazy, although you push hard enough and long enough through driving to drive somebody crazy, and you can actually ultimately push them through to the point where they actually snap and do become crazy through the delivery. Just as if you bully somebody physically long enough, you can eventually break them physically. So psychiatry, one of the real problems, I think, of psychiatry and psychology. You go to a psychiatrist and they say, okay, well, tell me how you're feeling. You start telling them how you're feeling. You start telling them you feel angry. You start trying to explain to them why you feel angry. And what they tend to do, or some of them do, is instead of listening to you, instead of saying, yeah, I understand, you tell them what happened to you and what people did and said to you that made you angry and why you became angry, and you just try to explain it. After they themselves, as the supposed experts, asked you to discuss with them your feelings and why you're angry, instead of saying, oh, that's interesting, I can see how that would be, and I understand why you're so angry. I would be angry too. See, that's a normal human interaction of listening to somebody. Genuinely listening to one human being listening to another, one person listening to another person. That's what they will say if they're actually listening. Yeah, oh, that's really that's really horrible, and I understand exactly how you feel. But what psychiatrists seem to often do is, instead of saying, I'm listening, I understand what you're saying, they say, or even saying, I'm listening to you, they'll say, I hear you saying this. That's a fucking game, every bit as much as I'm rubbering your glue. And probably not so very different. I hear you saying that you are angry. Is there... That's as I'm hearing you saying that you are angry is as different from I understand why you're angry. I understand your anger. As being driven crazy is different from being crazy. One is direct and the other is a game. Driving somebody crazy is a game. And being the psychiatry expert and sitting there saying, I hear you saying that you are angry, treating this person like they're an insect or a microorganism under a microscope rather than a human being, is a game designed to drive a person crazy. It's a form of psychological bullying. And it seems to me that to some degree, a certain percentage of people who gravitate to wanting to become a psychiatrist have a tendency to, whether they know it or not, to be this kind of a psychological bully, which is what attracts them to this as a career. To be able to sit there day after day and bully people psychologically. In the same way that I think a certain percentage of teachers gravitate towards that career because it attracts them, whether they realize it consciously or not, to be able to stand up every day in front of a bunch of smaller, weaker, vulnerable people who are smaller and younger, and be able to exercise this power over them. Say, I'm bigger and older and I have authority, I'm in a position of power, I'm the teacher and you're just a student, and I'm certified to be able to, licensed to be able to stand up here and tell you to shut up, tell you to obey orders, tell you not to talk back. There's a certain percentage of people gravitate towards teaching because that's what attracts them. And I had a few of those teachers, and you probably did too. Just as there's a certain number of people that gravitate towards being policemen. Because the idea of physically bullying people is attractive to them. Some people who were like physical bullies as kids might want to grow up to be policemen so they can push people around every day. And when I look at people doing things, having a career in a certain career, certain field, I find myself looking at them and thinking, well, what makes a person want to do that job? What makes a person want to be a prison guard? I don't want to do that job. What makes a person want to work in a slaughterhouse? I don't want to do that job. I couldn't do that job. I would probably die before I could before I could get through a week working in a slaughterhouse. What makes a person want to be a policeman? I ask myself when I see a policeman. When I end up getting, when I find myself in a situation being interrogated, stopped, questioned by a policeman, I find myself thinking, I wonder what makes a person want to become a policeman. When I think about some of the teachers I had, I ask myself, what makes a person want to be a teacher? And same thing with psychiatrists. I ask myself, what makes a person want to be a psychiatrist? And for some of them, it's an opportunity for psychological bullying. I hear you saying, because that's an opportunity to drive people crazy. And the more you drive people crazy, of course, rather than helping them actually resolve their psychological conflicts, the more you contribute to their psychological entanglements by driving them crazy, the more you keep them as customers. Because they're still messed up. You keep them messed up, and they're going to have to keep coming back to you to presumably cure them. Just as if you're a physical doctor, if you actually help people to get well, you're going to sort of lose them as customers, as patients. You're going to lose them as patients. And most businesses want repeat customers. So there is certain grounds for a certain degree of skepticism towards the medical industry as to whether they really want to cure people or whether they want to retain a loyal customer base that has to keep coming back. Just as any product that's sold that's a disposable product, any product that's deliberately designed for planned obsolescence, so that people have to keep buying replacements. There's a business model for that, and that may very well apply to certain aspects of the medical industry, and it may very well apply to certain aspects of the psychiatric industry. If we, in fact, keep you crazy rather than make you sane, we keep you as repeat customers, and that's our bread and butter. I hear you saying that you are angry. That's not going to help people. That's not going to heal people. What people need is to be able to actually... What drives a person crazy is not having anybody who actually listens to them as a human being. That's what drives you crazy. Being really isolated psychologically by having nobody who actually listens to you as a human being. And if you have feelings, especially feelings of anger or sadness or fear, and nobody is willing to actually listen to you, then you're in a solitary confinement throughout your life. No matter how many people you're actually interacting with physically, you're spending your life in solitary confinement, and that's what drives people crazy. And being driven crazy, you get sent to a psychiatrist. So what does a psychiatrist do? You pay them hundreds of dollars to sit there to do what people in your actual life, if anybody cared about you, ought to be doing just naturally without expecting financial compensation for it. But no, you're that pathetic and desperate that you have to pay somebody hundreds of dollars an hour just to listen to you. And then do they listen? Do they actually listen to you as a human being? No, they listen to you as you're the patient and they're the expert. You're the insect under the microscope and they're the human being in complete control. I hear you saying that you are angry. Not I understand why you're angry. Not I understand your anger. Not I understand how you feel. No, you're just a microorganism on a slide under a microscope. I hear you saying that you are angry. There you go. I'm rubber and you're glue. I'm the expert and you're the patient. Nothing that you say can affect me. I look down on you, and I am in complete control. I am in a position of power, and you are the nothingness under my thumb. And that's a political situation. Power, a political hierarchy where one person's in power, and you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. Because if you express your anger, then you're accused of being, oh, you're out of control and you're crazy. And of course, if you repress your anger, there are thousands of effects that it has on you personally, varying from person to person, whether it's migraines or ulcers or cancer or tics of some sort. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.